one of the things they didn't mention in having all this AI-controlled information in the car is advertising. They didn't mention that. If the AI can show you the hours of a business that you're driving by, if it can show you that, can't it show you advertisements too? Doesn't this just mean that the AI is going to get used to direct smart advertisements to you? I say smart in air quotes. Smart, I would say that's maybe another way of saying targeted advertisements. Oh, they also say this AI technology is capable of listening to in-cabin conversations. So maybe you are talking about going to a taco shop. Well, then it's going to show you ads for taco shops, which of course are unacceptable unless it's for Monica's Taco Shop. That's the only one that's acceptable.
From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars. You know, we've got a loaded show today. Mazda confirms a new Rotary sports car after literally years of them teasing it. Also, speaking of teasing, Toyota teases us some cool stuff at SEMA that they definitely will never sell to us. But it is cool. We will talk about it. And automakers are making a huge move to AI. Why? That's what I have to ask is why? What exactly does AI do in the car that automakers are so interested in? So we're going to get to all of that. We're going to get to some of your car sounds as well, and maybe some birthday car sounds. How about that, too? So that's going to be coming up here on Automotive ADHD. Now, we had a major snowstorm hit. It's been snowing for almost 4 days straight, and there's just been a bunch of snow. It's kind of shut the city down, at least here in Colorado Springs. Lots of cancellations, lots of stuff like that. But with all of that, I do want to make a formal statement and apologize to the security here at the radio studios, the security and building management at the, as well as my Salem media colleagues here at the AM 1460, The Answer Studios. It's my home base out of Colorado Springs, but of course you can hear this show all across southern Colorado. But there was a mix-up during the blizzard where somebody was driving a vehicle which coincidentally looked a lot like my truck, exactly like my truck actually, and they were spotted drifting in the radio station parking lot. Of course, with the fresh snowfall, and apparently the license plate was even really similar to mine, remarkably similar to mine. But I'm here to say that this definitely wasn't me. I would never condone doing such a thing. And furthermore, eyewitnesses, by the way, said that the driver did have a face for radio, which I will add actually proves that it wasn't me. I mean, sure, in the past, I've said I have a face for radio. I've said that. But I was mistaken. I think my face is more of like a local access television face. At least I could probably do local television. Maybe. So I think that probably proves my case that it wasn't me. But the drifting was really good. It was even skillful, or well, so I heard, by the way. So I heard. It wasn't just aimless donuts, which would have been fine, too, if it was. Not that I would know again, because it wasn't me. Now, that being said, I was told that the driver should probably lay off on the clutch kicks in the snow, probably because that's their daily driver Tacoma. That's not like the cool track car. It's the daily driver. Again, which coincidentally looks like my Tacoma. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, all these allegations, I get it. I'm a car guy, so, everyone here assumes that would be me. But people shouldn't assume the worst. They shouldn't assume that I would stoop so low that as soon as everyone had left for the day and there was even just a little light dusting of snow at the time on the parking lot, that I would go out there and slide my vehicle around like a hooligan. I would never do that. We definitely shouldn't assume the worst. So anyway, it was a unfortunate case of mistaken identity. A very unfortunate case. So anyway, winter storage. If you're hearing this, I talked a little bit briefly. Jim Miller and I touched on this topic just briefly a few weeks ago, but I wanted to elaborate on it more. And of course, if you are just hearing this now, then that probably means it's too late, especially if you are listening right here on the radio. Now, of course, my podcast listeners could be listening anywhere in the world, literally in the world, which I guess if they're in a place that doesn't have winter, well, good for you. Good for you. But I saw this interesting article here, and this comes by way of Garage Living. 11 pro tips to help preserve your prized ride. And I don't quite agree with all of these, but they do. And this is more catered, of course, if you have a summer vehicle or a nicer car that you don't want to drive in the wintertime. You want to put it away, make sure it's nice and safe and away from all the rust and nastiness on the roads. And they say that, of course, you should start with cleaning the exterior of the car, clean the interior. That way everything's super nice and fresh when in the springtime when you go actually, take it out and take it for a drive. But a big one here that they touched on, I will agree with, is keeping the critters away. You got to keep those mice away. Mice are going to be drawn to any stored vehicle you have. They're going to think that your wires look really delicious. Of course, as they are cold and hungry, trying to stock up for the winter, those mice are going to think anything looks delicious. So you should definitely take a few steps to probably, mitigate that, say using mouse traps around the vehicle. But you probably shouldn't use mouse traps inside the car. That would be a bad idea because, well, let me put it this way. If a mouse gets trapped and you don't find it till springtime and that's been inside your car the whole time, that's not going to be very fun to come back to, is it? So now you want to put those around the car. In the engine bay, I would err towards not doing that. But with that, Jim Miller has recommended, official Jim Miller recommendation, that get a cat. Just get a cat. That's the way to do it. That is absolutely the way to do it. Now, there's a couple other things I'll add on here, though, that I think you should do, which is I think you should do one of two things, specifically relating to the fuel. Either you could go to all the trouble and all the effort to completely drain the fuel out of the vehicle, which is kind of a pain to get it all. Or how about this? What if you filled it all the way up? And you might be saying, why would I fill it all the way up? Well, the idea here is that our modern fuels have a percentage of ethanol in them, especially even in the wintertime. Here in Colorado, the regular gas is almost 15% ethanol. And so when you look at that and you see that there's ethanol in there, ethanol does a thing that's interesting. And that is that it is hydroscopic. It attracts water, unlike the gasoline. So you can get water in your fuel purely from the air around it. It'll suck the water in from the moisture in the air, the humidity, and it'll put a nice little layer of water in your fuel tank there, and you really don't want that. So the idea here with filling it up all the way to the brim, at least, to the official brim, don't overfill it, but to the brim, is that you are now not allowing as much air to get into the tank, and by not allowing as much air to get into the tank, you're also not allowing as much humidity in that air to get in there and to get pulled in by that ethanol. So I think that that's probably a good call. Now, if you are a guy who has a vehicle that runs on flex fuel, you like running some more corn than 15%, you run maybe, say, E85, I would suggest burning through as much of that in your tank as possible. Get it down to pretty much nothing, then fill it back up again with regular premium or whatever. Just because, if you're running 85% ethanol in there, it's a lot more ethanol. I would rather just get that out of there. Also, ethanol can be somewhat dangerous, especially on older vehicles, to rubber lines and fittings and things. Though, I run my AE86 on ethanol. I have the stock lines. I haven't had any issues with it. I've been doing that for like 4 years. So take that with how you will. Guys will tell you that that's not possible, but I don't know, man. That's what I'm doing. So Anyway, aside from that, I would say a couple other things you ought to do is check those fluids, make sure everything's good. People say change your oil before storing it. I don't think that's a really good idea. Just change that when you are done and you're bringing it back out of storage in the springtime. Then go ahead and change that oil. Also, jack stands. If you're worried about flat spotting your tires, modern radial tires you really don't have to worry about, in my opinion. But if that makes you sleep better at night, go ahead and throw the car on some jack stands. And I think you will have a good winter experience. Or, how about this? I'm looking left and right, making sure, all right? Just drive it. Just drive it in the winter anyway. You'll be fine. At least here in Colorado, we get a lot of sunny days despite the snow. So anyway, hey, coming up after the break, we are going to talk about AI and why auto manufacturers are jumping headfirst into that. That's coming up here on Automotive ADHD. Who was that? I don't know who that was. No idea. If you're watching on video, you also saw who that was, but I don't know who that was. Facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars. Oh, by the way, video. Speaking of video, I discovered something really cool here. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. If you go to Spotify now, this has been a feature for a little bit, but if I just learned about this, maybe you also are going to just learn about it. But if you go into Spotify, and I know that that's where like 90% of my listeners who listen on the podcast catch this show. That is the number one platform that this show is heard on. If you go to Spotify, they've added video on Spotify. I didn't notice this until I tuned into a couple of big podcasts, and they had video playing. I was like, how are they doing that? So I did some research, and you will now find that, if I pull it up here, there we go. I got the podcast open, and look at that. If you're watching on video, now obviously if you're not watching on video, you can't see the fact that I'm showing you the video, but there it is. That is Jim Miller's beautiful face on this video right here. From the podcast. So now Spotify supports video podcasts. And seeing how this show is already on video, we're on YouTube as well, and you can catch clips of the show on Facebook. It's now just going to be there on Spotify too. So really interesting thing. Of course, if you are already following the show on Spotify and didn't know there was video, or maybe you already follow it and you're like, man, he's just now doing that video thing? Really? Anyway, go ahead and make sure to follow the show and also give the show a rating. You can rate shows on Spotify. Blow it up. 6 out of 5 stars. You might need to bump it down to 5 out of 5 stars just because it's my face on there and, well, face for radio or maybe local access television. That's what we'll say. That's what we'll say there. So, now I also, real quick, was a guest earlier this morning on another show, which was fun. It wasn't a car show. It was Jason Lupo's Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom show. That the 4 F's right there. And Jim Miller was on too, which was really fun. Now it's a conservative political show. So if you do want to hear Jim and myself talking politics and getting into it, you can go check that out online on Spotify and wherever other shows are downloaded. But and by politics, I mean that we talked about Peanut the Squirrel for about 25 minutes straight. That it was really a long and enlightening and engaging conversation about Peanut the Squirrel. So anyway, so if you want to hear me go on a political show and not talk politics, but instead talk about a dead squirrel, you can do that. So anyway, I got to touch on this too. Speaking of politics, this is a car show. I've said before that I keep the political stuff pretty tame on this show, just considering that, well, it is a car show, and most people listening to this show have been hearing politics all week. They've been hearing news, they've been hearing this, and this show is a break from the regular day-to-day news cycle. But there are cases where politics involves cars, and this being a car show means I need to talk about it. And sometimes it involves cars in a way that's really important. Really important. Last week on the show, Jim Miller and I discussed his conversation he had with the mayor of Colorado Springs. He confronted the mayor, in fact, about some crazy automotive laws and ordinances and stuff on the books here in Colorado Springs. But I also want to touch on this. You might have noticed there was an election earlier this week. You might have noticed. And I will say this. The outcome of the election, I think, from an automotive perspective, was a very, very good thing. All the way from the top, all the way down ballot through the rest of it. And there's a reason for that. And that's if you like cars casually. Maybe not even casually. If cars are actually your passion, or maybe they're your job. For a lot of us, they're either a passion, a job, or both. And crazy things like automotive kill switches, which is like basically passed. I should say basically passed. It is in there. It's literally in there. The kill switch mandate is in effect. We're just waiting. We're just waiting for it to happen. They told the auto manufacturers, figure it out. But anyway, so the kill switch mandates, speed limiters, shutting down oil pipelines, energy independence, removing energy independence, and also finding race shops into oblivion. That's something that's been happening too. That is something that's absolutely been happening. And that's been predominantly orchestrated by the incumbent party for the past 4 years. And again, I'm not talking just presidential. I'm talking all across the board, from the top down to the bottom. And so I want to say that if you are a true automotive enthusiast, maybe now we can actually take a stand at defunding the EPA Gestapo, and maybe even getting rid of some crazy rules and laws that are seeking to prohibit you from having consumer choice and buying what works for you. Or, like I said, shutting down race shops. The EPA, by the way, sure, I love our environment. There is a purpose for the EPA. There is. But the EPA has been disproportionately targeting car guys. It's been disproportionately targeting automotive businesses. And for what? The automotive businesses, the car guys, the track guys are such a infinitely small percent, maybe not even a whole percent of the grand scheme of things. If you say, oh, it's about emissions, it's such a small percent. So why are they getting the brunt of the enforcement when they are the smallest percentage of it? Right? So anyway, I think that, I still haven't forgotten that the EPA has literally proposed rules which would make it illegal to turn a car that was once destined for the street into a track car. Knowing that you would never use it on the street again, no, it would still be illegal to do that. That's what the RPM Act, I went so hard promoting the RPM Act in years prior because the RPM Act was backed by SEMA, and it was an act that was designed to limit the EPA's authority to do that. Now, essentially, we have a hold on what the EPA is doing right now, but we didn't necessarily win. The RPM Act didn't pass in the legislative session. So my point being that, the EPA has really, in the past 4 years, really cracked down hard on automotive enthusiasts and business owners. And it's about the business owners, too. It's not just me being able to buy an exhaust, a catback exhaust for my car. It's not just about that. It's about the guys who make those catback exhausts. It's about the guys who build that stuff, the jobs, the industries that do it. If they're not around to make the things, I can't buy the things. Let me put it that way. So if you're just sitting there, it's like, man, I'm not in the business. I just like to drive my car around, have a little bit of fun with it. Sure, that's fine, but it still affects you. So anyway, I do want to put I want to put this out there, and then I'm going to get off of the political horse here. I promise I will. SEMA, of course, has been doing tremendous advocacy work for auto enthusiasts. And even with all that hard work, we've just barely managed to prevent some of these things coming down the pipeline that would be really bad for automotive businesses and automotive enthusiasts. We've just barely managed to squeeze by on that. And what's crazy is fighting these proposals from the EPA and other politicians costs a ton of money. SEMA spends a boatload of money, resources, time, manpower to try to keep these things from affecting us. Meanwhile, the people pushing them have tax dollars. They literally have their taxpayer funded. They have tax dollars at their disposal, which means we, as taxpayers, are actually funding our opponents and then also paying for our own defense by donating to SEMA and, things like that and being members of that. So I just want to throw that out there. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully we have the right to preserve the choice for consumers and save our race cars. Defund the EPA, preserve consumer choice, save our race cars. There we go. I'm off. I'm off my political horse here. Rant over. Let's talk AI. And I'm going to maybe, I've only got a couple minutes in this segment here, so I'm not going to go too far into it. We'll save it for the next segment. But there is a lot of stuff going on with AI. I feel like AI is the new buzzword now, techno buzzword. I mean, in years past, you had like email, right? And then the people were starting to put E in front of everything to make it, it's electronic this, right? Same thing with the iPod and the iPhone. Then suddenly everything became something. It was kind of a buzzword. It was an industry thing. And AI has absolutely, I think, is definitely that for this decade, at the very minimum for this decade, if not more. And it's granted, AI is probably going to be here for a long time. It's going to be around. It's going to get used in various ways. I have opinions on AI as a whole as it relates to not just cars. I really think AI should be staying out of the creative realms. I think AI can be a great tool to aid a creative process, right? I don't use any AI in the production of this show. I don't use it to make my show notes for what show notes do exist. I don't do that. I don't have AI video editors working for me. It'd probably be cheaper if I did. But my point being that I think AI can be a good tool. Okay, maybe you have an AI noise filter, for example, and it works really well, and it helps you with your creative process. Great. It shouldn't replace the creative process, though. It shouldn't replace the person writing it. It shouldn't replace that. So that's kind of my take before we talk about how this relates to cars. I think, AI, for one, I think it's being a little overhyped. It is being a little overhyped. For sure, but I also think that it is a risk to a lot of job fields, and a lot of job fields that were previously unthreatened by AI as a whole. I mean, certain, even fields like engineering and, things like that are being threatened by AI, and those are previously thought of as safe fields. Like, well, maybe mechanized machines will replace labor on this farm. So you would worry about that if you're just doing manual labor. But if you go to college and you get a job and you do something like engineering, you'll be safe. That's not true anymore. So I think there needs to be, though, a good balance on how we handle ourselves with AI, because it can be an incredibly powerful tool, but it can also be overused drastically. And how are car manufacturers dealing with this? Well, we know car manufacturers are using AI to help in the design. That's not saying AI is designing cars, but it's being used to expedite certain processes of design, and we know that that's a case. But we also know they want to put AI in not just from the perspective of making the cars. They also want to have AI from the perspective of using the cars. And what does that look like? Well, all the big auto manufacturers are jumping on this. They're jumping on it hard. And I don't necessarily see a need for AI inside the car. But we're going to get to all of that and more, as well as more of your car sounds. That's here on Automotive ADHD. Don't go anywhere.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
So before the break, I was talking about AI. AI is kind of a big thing these days. It's maybe a little overhyped. I think it's overhyped, but it is very powerful in some ways. And automakers are pushing AI really, really big. That's what they are doing. Now, this comes by way of Motor Trend, and it says, it's hat tip Doug Newcomb, by the way, why Mercedes, General Motors, and Google are all pushing AI for cars. Why are they pushing AI for cars? Now, of course, if you pay attention to the stock markets and these other things, you see companies related to AI, they're getting a lot of that green stuff. They're getting a lot of that money. So part of it is probably, the fact that, well, okay, let's invest in AI, and investors will think that's a good thing and we'll make some money out of it. Now, obviously, they're probably in it for the long run too, to, well, again, make more money. So you ever seen the movie Spaceballs? And then they tease it, they joke in the movie that, and coming up, the sequel, Spaceballs 2, The Quest for More Money. That's exactly what's going on here. But is it a good thing? I'm skeptical of that. But there is a semiconductor company called Qualcomm. If you're into technology at all, you've probably heard their name. And they had the Qualcomm Snapdragon Summit in Hawaii just the other day, and it featured all sorts of stuff, enhanced features for cars, apparently, to show off some of the latest technology, some of the latest advancements in AI-powered chips to live inside cars. And according to the Motor Trend article here, I'll just read some of it here. They say one was a heads-up display style translucent overlay that shows information such as hours and different info and things like that in cars, hours for businesses, stuff like that, right in the driver's field of view. So you could, in theory, have this heads-up display, and you can drive by a business, and it'll just tell you their hours and some other things, that maybe you want to know. Maybe you don't care to know because you're not going into that business, but it'll still tell you. They also showed similar pop-ups that could be displayed on glass that would show, that would remind young passengers to, buckle up in the back seat, and maybe, they're going to have a thing in the back for the kids and they can have a school quiz there, help them with their homework and make flashcards and other things like that. And now, granted, I think that this is anyone asking for this? Not really. Now, in the article here, they say OEMs are wanting to move very fast. While this looks and sounds like a technology concept we may not see for years down the road, Nakul Dugal, a group general manager, automotive industrial and a manager of automotive, industrial, and cloud for Qualcomm, said it would come to cars much faster, again, relating to AI. And he says, quote, with the platforms that they're building, OEMs are wanting to move very fast, and they're going to put these chips into the market in 18 months, end quote. And again, I come back to this. I keep coming back to this as I'm looking through here, but who's asking for it? Okay, the OEMs are asking for it, but are consumers really asking for it? I don't know. Now, they also have another Snapdragon Qualcomm chip that is designed to control in-cabin features such as entertainment, navigation, climate control, things like that. And it also, they say, supervises driver assist programs and automated driving. So they're showing off. Again, this is Qualcomm, the semiconductor manufacturer, showing off all the cool things their AI chips can do when those are in cars. And again, from a technical aspect, it is very cool and it is interesting. But they also go to show that there are a number of other things that this can do. Of course, from, they say they gave another example of showing that, well, maybe the car can look at the weather and it can say, that, oh, it's a nice day. And because you usually drive with the sunroof open on a nice day, it'll just automatically open the sunroof for you. It'll do that. It'll turn on the heater controls automatically. I need to, and reeling this back in here. I could understand why companies like Mercedes, luxury companies, and these others would want that. I mean, I suppose that airs a sense of luxury to a vehicle. I don't really like it, though, mostly because I like to be in control of the vehicle, personally. I think this is, automating all these functions of the car. I mean, automation is only good so long as it actually works well and does what you want. If you have to spend twice as much effort undoing what the automation did to do what you want, that's kind of a pain, in my opinion. But also, opening the sunroof, turning the heater on. Again, I don't want, call me weird, maybe my opinion's unpopular. I don't know. Maybe you share this opinion. You could let me know on the Facebook page, facebook.com/automotiveadhd. But I share the opinion of I want to be in control of the car, the entire vehicle, as much as possible. Everything from not just driving the car. Yes, I want to be in control of that part. Of course I want to be in control of that part. But I don't want the darn thing turning the heater on when I didn't ask it to do that. I don't want it opening the sunroof when I didn't tell it to do that. Even if, well, it is a sunny day and it opens the sunroof. What if I didn't want that? What if I had a hat on and I didn't want my hat to blow away? I don't know, something stupid. My point being that I want the car to do things as I tell it. And that's why I also like physical buttons. I am huge on physical buttons. If you know anything from my show, if you know that, I've said in the past, I'm a huge supporter of having physical buttons back in cars. They're better. The studies show, the actual scientific studies show, they are not only easier to use, but they are safer. Now, you could say, well, yeah, but if you have an AI doing it and you don't even have to touch a button, how safe is that? Ha-ha, gotcha. Well, maybe you did get me, but I'm going to just, I would just probably sit on my high horse and say, yes, but I still want to push the button myself at the end of the day. And how can I trust the AI to do what I want it to do? Now, they're showing off these other features again, like, the info displays that could be handy in cars that display relevant information. I mean, how much, they're showing all this information that you can have displayed. But how much of that do you need? How much of that do you really care to have? I kind of want to be focused on the driving experience, whether I'm driving around town. The most information I want is maybe a GPS map in the gauge cluster in that area. That's the most information I'm really concerned with. I don't care about the hours of the business that I'm driving by. I don't care about where the nearest taco shop is, because I already know that Monica's Taco Shop, I know where that is in town, and that's the one I'm going to go to. Shout out to Monica's Taco Shop. But having said that, how much information do you really need? Is this stuff that consumers are asking for? Is this stuff that's actually useful? And I proposed something that I did not see in this whole article, and I've only really skimmed through the article. I know I said I was going to read some more parts of it, but that's what I get for making show prep. I just go off the rails with it. But one of the things they didn't mention in having all this AI-controlled information in the car is advertising. They didn't mention that. If the AI can show you the hours of a business that you're driving by, if it can show you that, can't it show you advertisements too? Doesn't this just mean that the AI is going to get used to direct smart advertisements to you? I say smart in air quotes. Smart, I would say that's maybe another way of saying targeted advertisements. Oh, they also say this AI technology is capable of listening to in-cabin conversations. So maybe you are talking about going to a taco shop. Well, then it's going to show you ads for taco shops, which of course are unacceptable unless it's for Monica's Taco Shop. That's the only one that's acceptable. So anyway, I think this is, to me, something that car manufacturers are wanting to do. I think, of course, we're going to see this in the next year, 2 years even, in new cars. We're going to see advertisements for vehicles really, really hammering down on AI. And I think that it's silly. I hope this is a fad. There are useful things that AI can do, but all this information and ads and stuff inside your cars, that's not something I want. So, hey, let me know your thoughts on AI. Facebook.com/AutomotiveADHD. Coming up after the break, we're talking Toyota. They got some cool. All right. Well, hey, you are listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the weekend, or, well, if you're listening to this on the podcast, might be the middle of the week. Those car sounds, by the way. Hey, that comes by way of Wesley A. Martin, his 2011 Camry, by the way, with the 6-speed manual. Let's go, 6-speed. I love that. 2.5 liter, 4-cylinder in there. Wesley, by the way, it is his birthday coming up on the 14th of this month. So let's congratulate him. Have a very happy birthday, Wesley. Thank you for sending your car sounds into the show. And of course, thanks for driving a 6-speed, a manual. I love that. I mean, look, I think everything, we should just manual the world. Everything should be manual. Automatics don't exist. I really appreciate that, though. So, hey, Wesley, thank you for sending those car sounds into the show. And if you want to be like Wesley and send your car sounds into the show, you can do that. Not only can you do that, I'm going to encourage you to do that. And you can send those at facebook.com/automotive-ADHD. You can send me a private message on there, or you can post it to the pinned post at the top of the page, which is kind of like the car sound mega thread, just tons and tons of car sounds that are listener submitted in there. So go ahead and do that. Have your car sounds featured on the show. And Wesley, keep an eye out for a message as well. I'm going to ask you for an address because I'm going to send you a birthday present. So keep an eye out for that there as well. So anyway, of course, you are listening to the Automotive ADHD show. I'm your host, Matt West. I might have said that already, but I'll say it again. And I want to talk a little bit about Mazda. I like Mazdas. I like the Miata. I like the RX-7s, both the FCs and the FD generation RX-7s. I think they're very cool cars. I've never owned one, admittedly. I've been more of a diehard Toyota guy. I've owned some Hondas and things like that, but the Mazdas are interesting to me, and I love that Mazda's making the Miata still, and they're making it in the way God intended with a manual transmission. And but they are also doing some interesting things. This comes by way of Motor Trend. Another Mazda hint at a rotary engine sports car. But this time it's less of a hint. They've been teasing us with concepts. I don't always talk about concepts on the show because you never know when they're going to happen. You don't know if they're ever truly going to happen. But having said that, this is more than a concept now. It plays off of a previous concept car, sure. But here we go. So there is confirmation that Mazda has recreated a team, specifically a development team, for the rotary engine. Now, they have, what is it here? Somewhere around 30? Yeah, 30 engineers will comprise the reconstituted rotary team and focus on figuring out how to fit the rotary into the transition to carbon neutrality. So they're committed to keeping the rotary, but they're also committed to keeping it, I suppose, being carbon neutral. And rotary engines are interesting motors. If you're just tuning in on the radio and you're not familiar with the rotary, it's you don't have any pistons. You got like 3 moving parts in this thing. It's a giant triangle spinning inside of a housing, and it is a very fascinating engine design. It is often called a Wankel engine, crediting to the original designer. Mazda did not invent the rotary, but perhaps Mazda perfected the rotary as much as one can. Rotaries aren't that reliable, I'll say that. They've never had a reputation for reliability. They tend to need apex seals quite often, but that's okay. We like them because they rev really high and they make cool noises. But Mazda does say they're bringing back the rotary development team. They say that they also have some new patents that have been filed to go along with that. And part of this is, yes, it's some rumor mill stuff. Yes, it is. We don't really have any details other than that they had a concept a few years ago, the SP concept, which sort of looks like a blend between a Miata and an FD RX-7. Trust me, it actually does look kind of cool. I can see lines from both of those cars in the design. And sure, that's a concept car, but they said that concept car is closer to production ready than most concept cars, which I also think is fascinating. Now, what's very likely is that the rotary engine Mazda sports car is probably going to be an electric hybrid, and that rotary engine's probably going to be spinning a generator rather than the wheels directly. So that's not really what us enthusiasts want. But at least it's a rotary in there. At least it's a sports car. I commend them for doing that much. Rotary engines, by the way, are very efficient at higher RPMs and at sustained RPMs, which does make them fairly uniquely suited to generator duty. When I've talked with Chase Barber from Edison Motors on the show, I mean, he's talked about how it's more efficient to spin a small engine at its peak efficiency range rather than having it try to lug around a whole vehicle at different RPM ranges. Have it sit at one very efficient range and then spin it there and spin an electric generator with it. We know that works. So that's probably what's gonna happen here. So I wanted to just add that little piece of good news into the mix here. Anytime there's a new sports car on the horizon, yes, I know economy cars sell. Yes, pickup trucks sell very good here in the United States, obviously, too. But with all of those being said, and yes, people care about the cars they actually drive every day. Those are the crossovers. Those are the economy cars. On this show, at least, we don't care about that. We just want sports cars. That's what we want. Low-volume sports cars that no one's going to buy, but gosh darn it, do they look cool. That's what counts. Because remember, looking cool is at least half the battle. So I'm sure that's how the quote goes. Now, speaking of looking cool, Toyota's out at SEMA doing some really cool stuff. The SEMA car show is going on now. I did talk about the political advocacy work earlier in the show that SEMA does. They do that for the rest of the year, but in November, they do the SEMA car show. Biggest aftermarket car show around. Toyota, this is what I'm most excited about. There's a handful of other cool Toyotas out there. They have a GR rally concept, and gosh, this looks like a Celica GT4 if I've ever seen one. And it's not just the cool livery that looks like the old school Castrol Racing livery. It's not just that. Sure, it looks cool. It's not just the wing on the back that makes this look like an old Celica GT4. It is the drivetrain. And if you're watching on video, I'll overlay some footage in here of the drivetrain. Looking at that engine bay, that is not just a Subaru flat 4 2.4 liter that you would normally find in the Toyota GR sports car. Of course, with their collaboration with Subaru. No, that is the 3-cylinder turbo out of the GR Corolla, and I really like that. The GR Corolla and the GR Yaris, similar drivetrain. It's the same idea, and it produces 300 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque in stock form, and up to 295 pound-feet of torque in certain trims, which is cool. But most importantly with this, it's all-wheel drive. They stuffed the whole all-wheel drive setup from the GR Corolla into the GR86. The GR86 being, a rear-wheel drive sports coupe. Now, this one's all-wheel drive, just like a proper rally car should be. They said that they had to modify the subframe significantly in the rear. The front subframe is basically custom from the ground up to fit the entirely different drivetrain. I mean, entirely different. And it's for one, the drivetrain in the front, the engine's going to be a transverse layout in the front that drives the front wheels and then goes and drives the back wheels, unlike something that would be driving the back wheels predominantly and then the front wheels with something else. So it's a little different, but gosh, it is cool. It makes me wish Toyota would just produce something like this. If they knew what was good, they would do this. They would do this. They would probably still not warranty it for going over 80 miles an hour. Probably. That's how things seem to be going at Toyota. But man, they are good at teasing us with cool stuff, and I really properly like this. I think it looks awesome. Of course, will they make it? No, they're never going to make it. They're never going to make it. Come on, who do we think they are? Oh, I can dream, though. I can dream. I can also get out a welder and a torch and make something that maybe a quarter as decent as that. So anyway, hey, don't miss a minute of this show. Lots of great ways to catch it. YouTube, Facebook. Also, I mentioned earlier in the show, video on Spotify now. Thanks to everyone who helps put this show on the air. Thanks to Jared. Thanks to Alex. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening.